Hi, everybody. I'm Dennis Daly. I spent 20 years with United Press International, most of it with the old UPI Radio Network. And my favorite assignment was going on the road producing and hosting American Montage. It was an hour-long weekly program. Now here's an edited version of one of those shows. Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's American Montage. We are standing beside one of the off-ramps of Interstate 395, very near the Beltway that encircles Washington, D.C. Technically, this is Alexandria, Virginia. More specifically, it's an area called Bryn Mawr. About 20 or so years ago, engineers realized that Bryn Mawr would be the perfect place to put satellite uplinking dishes. And so many of the programs you see that come out of the Washington, D.C. area, whether they be regularly scheduled programs such as Face the Nation on weekends, or special programs, one-shot reports from Washington, come out here to Bryn Mawr and go up to the satellite and back down, and eventually you get to see and hear them. Of course, satellite communications has revolutionized everything. I'm old enough to remember a time that when I was working in local radio, everything came through the phone company, whether it be the radio network or St. Louis Cardinal baseball or whatever. It all came through the phone company on special wires. And when things went wrong, you checked with the phone company. But now a lot of it goes up to satellites and back down. A little lesson in how satellites work first. For example, you're listening to a radio station right now. I don't need to tell you that. Whether it's AM or FM, it doesn't matter. The radio station sends out the signal from its antenna, and your radio picks it up. But this program is getting to you in a very roundabout way. It was sent originally, and of course you know that we're live on tape, from Washington, D.C., up to a satellite and back down to your radio station, which in return is receiving it and sending it out its transmitter into your radio. Complicated, right? But it happens instantaneously. What we're going to do is to go through one of the premier satellite uplinking centers and talk to a gentleman who's an expert on satellites to kind of clear up the mystery on how electronic communications work on this week's American Montage. If you're in broadcasting, you tend to notice things such as satellite farms or big fancy antennas, but if you're not, sometimes they're invisible. Even though in parts of the country there are tremendous numbers of those great big white dishes sending and receiving satellite signals. Recently we went to Stamford, Connecticut. That is the headquarters of Group W's Network Services Department. You may know the name Group W, Westinghouse, a venerable name in broadcasting, KDKA, the first regularly scheduled commercial station in the U.S., a Westinghouse station. The gentleman who runs the affair in Stamford, Connecticut is Alden Stalker. He's the Senior Vice President and General Manager of Group W Network Services. He is one of the nation's foremost experts on satellite communications. When we visited his facility in Stamford, he took us around, but first we sat down and talked about the history of satellite communications and how it all started.
It's been around for quite some time, but it hasn't been... It's really been about 14 years now. 1979, 1980 was really the dawn, if you will, of the heavy commercialization of satellite communications for we call common carrier, non-telephone companies and non-government applications. I've been in the broadcasting business actually for 20-some years now, so I had the pleasure of being part of Westinghouse, who was a very technically conversant company, and it seemed appropriate to get into the satellite business at that point in time. In 1979, 1980, we installed C-band earth station facilities at all of the Group W TV stations.
Now, can I define that? Do I understand that when you say earth station, you mean a facility that's capable of sending the signal up to the satellite, or am I confusing the issue here? Does earth station mean receiving or transmit, or necessarily both?
It really means both. In fact, a parabolic antenna, the type that you'll see at large installations, but these days you'll see them on people's houses and you see them on local gas stations. Most of those antennas are actually fully capable of transmitting and receiving, and in the broadcast, both the radio and television business, a large percentage of those antennas do in fact transmit and receive.
For example, this would allow a small-town television station, let's say, I mentioned Indiana, Evansville, Indiana, if there's a natural disaster there, for example, that TV station might have the capability of sending the pictures back to a network, or CNN, for example, in a way that years ago would have maybe not even been possible or been an enormous expense.
Well, that's exactly right. As a matter of fact, I think a very high percentage of the network-affiliated TV stations in this country do have the ability to transmit material, commonly news, back to their networks. Well, it was exactly the same way in the TV side of the business. Up until about 1981, 82, 83, depending on the network, all network distribution was done by coaxial cable running on the ground, typically out of New York City and going around the country. That was very costly and it wasn't the most reliable service, and also had some technical disadvantages. So when the satellites were launched that had video capability, the networks all one after another started to make use of that capability. So now what happens is that the programming is delivered from wherever it is originated, still typically New York City, although much of it also comes out of Los Angeles, and then is delivered directly to the affiliate TV stations. And the big difference now between what it was then is that not only is the quality considerably better, and so is the reliability, but it gives the broadcast network the ability to easily sectionalize or regionalize their network. We do a great deal of business here at Group W Network Services for CBS. As a matter of fact, the majority of the CBS broadcast network product that you see in the U.S., we handle on their behalf. CBS has the ability to actually have 8 CBS networks. Now, obviously, some of those are related to time shifts for different regions of the country, but the majority of that is to allow for separate commercial content for different regions of the country. The old story of selling snow tires in Minnesota and swimsuits in Florida is very accurate in this business.
Well, I was going to mention that. When I was in high school, I went to the AT&T Switching Center in Terre Haute, Indiana, and the television pictures had a tap-off point, if you will, there for the layman to go to the Indianapolis TV stations and that type of thing. But it was a football game in the fall, and there were 3 engineers with headsets on talking to New York because they actually had to switch the cable so that you would get a snow tire commercial for people in the southern half of the U.S., but a regular Goodyear tire commercial in the north. And all of this, which I guess is done by computer now, there were guys with big cords, 2 or 3 inches in diameter, and just swinging their arms around. And it was like just all holy heck broke loose when someone said, now.
The big thing with the satellite systems is that the user, the programmer, in this case the network, has 100% control of their own distribution without the need for any third party in the middle.
Let's, if we can, for a person listening, before we talk about what all services you do here, try to explain how a satellite works. Let me start. The satellites that are commonly used in broadcasting are, from the perspective of Earth, basically sitting still. They're doing a little station keeping up there, I understand, making a little bow tie pattern to keep the inertia going in some instances. But they're sitting there. If you would, start, let's say, a CBS television program. We're here in Stamford, Connecticut. I'm not sure how many air miles that is from downtown New York. But take us from the master control room at CBS Television, downtown New York City, through the process until it gets to a person watching at home on television, in very basic terms.
Very basic terms. Well, I think you start with a satellite. Satellite is a common term. And really, you can think of a satellite as nothing more than a big mirror in the sky. That's really all the satellite does, is takes a signal that is transmitted from an earth station on the ground, bends it, if you will, reflects it, if you will, back down to a receiving antenna on the ground. But the major benefit of a satellite is that a satellite is distance insensitive. The footprint, as it's called, or the coverage, if it's called, from the satellite covers the entire continental U.S., almost always Hawaii and Alaska and the Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. So essentially all of the U.S., continental U.S. and all the states are covered from that single satellite.
Well, in the theater, if they want to wish a person good luck, they say break a leg. I guess the thing to say here is don't blow a fuse.
Good enough. We'll accept that.
Alden, thanks for showing us around. It's a great place here, and I hope for people who never stop to think that all of this doesn't just happen automatically, they realize now a lot of work goes into it.
Well, I think in most cases it's really the behind-the-scenes activity that makes or breaks whatever the task is, and we have some extremely competent engineering operations people here, and that really is what makes this place tick the way it does. But thank you for your compliment. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And there you have it, another edited episode of one of the American Montage programs prepared for the UPI Radio Network back in the 1980s and 90s. I'm Dennis Daly. Thanks for listening. Thanks for going with me this week. And check YouTube for more American Montage programs.